Very good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, on the fifth episode of Wellness Changemakers Leadership Edition, in which our theme has been creating empathetic and high performing organizations. Today, we have the honor of having Mr. Kamal Karanth with us. Kamal is a talent specialist and entrepreneur. He was one of LinkedIn's top voices of 2020. He's a co-founder of Xfino, which is a specialized talent solutions company, and comes with over two decades of experience. Uh, we will be talking more about him and his accomplishments in the coming session. So thank you so much, Kamal, for joining us today.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
It is our privilege as well to have you here. Kamal, tell us a little bit about how are you doing considering the whole situation right now. Hope things are well at your end.
Yeah, can't complain. I'm counting my blessings, So it has come home, like I was telling you. So I have two of my family members currently positive. So they quarantined there, and here I am talking to you. So it can't get closer than this, is what I'm thinking. Luckily, God's grace, we're all safe and nothing to worry about. So that is, where we are at this point of time and how I am, dealing with it, doing the work that I have to do, and also taking care of family. So that's where life is.
Absolutely. So glad to hear that everyone's well though, and and we are so glad that you are taking all this so well as well. So to start with, I think so to tell the audience, Kamal regularly blogs and also holds live sessions on his LinkedIn about on the topic of workplace dynamics. So, Kamal, if you could start with telling us a little bit about what exactly is workplace dynamics.
Sure, Saish. For me, workplace dynamics is a kind of a conflicting zone within an organization. What I mean by that is, in organization there are people, the processes, the policies, the technologies, and all of them, when they come together, there are those zones which they meet, which create these conflicts, which is people versus people versus policies and processes, and people versus technologies. If you look at all these pieces together, it's mostly whether it is process, policy, technology triggering, eventually people versus people. For me, that is what constitutes workplace dynamics. And everything that we do, whether it's, let's say, somebody's getting hired, somebody's getting promoted, somebody's getting an increment, are all processes and policies through which we actually interact with people. And every time they come together in a good way or a not so good way, I think that's what I call as the conflicting zone. And that's what I term is the workplace dynamics of organizations.
Thank you so much for that. And of course, how important is this whole thing, workplace dynamics, for creating a successful organization?
Definitely, the success, if you define the success of organization as profitability, market share, Wall Street success, innovative products, then I think many companies have already done that. The disruption of the market, innovative products has been demonstrated by many companies, but some of them we also have not been able to bring the balance of the people processes together. So if you want to create a successful company defined by commercial success, you can anyhow do it without people being along with it. At the same time, if you want an organization which that you think is there for the long term, does not go through the toxicity that one needs to go through, then I guess you start with the people part of it. But let's face it that most of the companies and the startups that we celebrate are focused on product, profit, and people. In that order they come, right? But you can't blame them either for the reason that the organization is coming for the reason of being commercially successful first, survival first. And then I guess many of the things related to people, other things come into play and people start focusing on that. So you can't blame them. Even the large MNCs of today were startups yesterday. So even in their phase, they were looking at product and the success of the profit, and then possibly the people processes came into play. And eventually many of these companies also corrected. So I would like to believe that if you have a reasonable sense of balance between workplace dynamics, as a company, I would like to believe that the success of the so-called commercial success of the company is also long-term. The
Yeah,
challenge is when you're in a survival mode and you tend to work in a particular way. You are likely to look at survival, right? So, and you're going to look at the commercial success. By then, many of the rituals, cultures of the company sort of sets in. And in a way, I would like to believe that becomes the DNA of the company. And DNA is something permanent core to you. And it becomes very difficult to change that over a period of time. So at an early stage, getting these workplace dynamics right of these people, process, policies, talking to each other, and in a semblance of balance is very important to the long-term success slash DNA of the company.
absolutely. Absolutely. And this is something that, in the previous 4 episodes, that a lot of people talked about, that for the long term success that you talked about, the sustainability of creating that future successful organization. A lot of people mention that it is very important to have empathy, an empathetic work culture. So where does empathy come into all this in your experience?
Let's start by admitting that empathy is in short supply, especially before COVID at an enterprise level. Because we struggle to understand people who aren't like us, and we find it very easy to hate them because we like to have a talking to people who are mostly like us in a way. And also for the longest time, I believe that empathy is kind of a fixed trait. You either have it or you don't have it. And over a period of time, people taught me, and I also believe that that empathy is something that as a skill that can be developed. Though it is not something like a switch that you can sort of switch it on when it comes to you. But I also think uh, unless societally we become more empathetic, it will be very difficult to transform organizations, and more importantly, its leaders. After all, our parents, our upbringing, cultural heritage, societal influences, and first few employees influence how we behave, how we think, and also to be empathetic or not, right? And at an organization level, I believe empathy is based on transactions and not real relationships. What I mean by that is like, there are certain things that we have as a template, as an expectation, and if that meets our expectation, we possibly will be a little more empathetic to the situation or the person. And I believe it comes from our schooling and college. The other day, in fact, in one of the WhatsApp groups that our classmates are in, we were fighting about a 11th standard maths teacher. And the conversation the top two students were telling us is that, look, she was great and she used to solve all our doubts. She was very nice. We used to go and meet her after the class, and she's the best teacher we had, and she possibly changed her life. Whereas some of us were arguing, including me, that look, I don't think she understood the struggles of people who were struggling with mathematics, and somewhere she was less patient with us. She didn't understand our world. And possibly the explanation was that we thought she believed that we didn't put enough efforts, and she never gave a consideration to us that, some of us were struggling with maths. So I believe her template was that if you're doing well, I would only reciprocate to you better. If you're a high scoring student, then I'll focus on you. The low scoring students are possibly not putting enough effort, so I will treat them in a particular way. I would like to believe the same thing has transferred even to the organizations as well. For example, if there are people who are meeting our templates of performance, productivity, and even behaviors, we tend to be possibly more empathetic to them in terms of making more accommodation to them, or listening to them even. Whereas if you find people who are always throwing problems at us or are not fitting into the templates of certain behaviors that we expect from them, I think we sort of stop being empathetic to them. Because if you're empathetic to them, that means you have to align to what they're saying, take those problems with you, and also meaning accepting lower productivity and maybe delayed timelines and things like that. So I believe, this expectation-based, conditional-based, empathy is something the enterprises are going through because we have come from that cultural heritage. I don't think when we struggled, our teachers or our parents were less demanding. I don't think they never understood our word. So I think that chain is continuing even today in the organization. That's what I have, my 2 cents on that is.
You're absolutely right. And think that example that you gave of the math teacher, I think almost all of us who are watching can relate to that, because that is a clear indication of just a lack of empathy completely. I think in Indian education system, almost all of us have experienced that. So thank you so much for bringing something so relatable. Um so just to remind everyone, by the way, that you should check out Kamal's blog on Xvino. He also blogs on LinkedIn, and he blogs also on Workplace Dynamics. And he has a weekly series on his live series like this on LinkedIn Live every Friday, which is on Workplace Stories. So do check it out. Uh, Kamal, talking about, say, your blog and your posts, you had recently written about something called the coaction effect. Could you tell us a little bit more about what is coaction effect, and how that has become all the more crucial maybe in the current circumstances that we find ourselves in?
I had, written in the context of work from home impact and individual
Yes,
and proactivity. That's
correct.
how coaction came into play. And in fact, one of my colleagues, my CTO, actually prompted me about the concept of coaction per se. He gave me a lot of examples, and I reflected on that and felt it really made sense in the current context that we are in, even in the context that we were in the past. Like they say, the coaction effect is when a task performs is increased by a mere presence of others doing the same task. Like they say, I believe the ants dig more in the presence of
Yeah.
other ants also digging, though they are not digging together.
Yes.
So it is like, you running through a sprint against someone, a 100-meter sprint against someone versus training alone. It is like, you sort of studying at library or even at home. Both are equally quiet, but you end up possibly being more productive at library. Why? Right? So some of these aspects, which I believe are also something which causes, the organization to work in a particular way. I still remember, out of college, about 40 of us were trained by, a pharmaceutical company where it was my first job. They possibly, after a training, released us on the same day to the field. And we were like those friends who wanted to give life to each other, yards and all that stuff. But we were all dispersed across the country working. And every month there used to be a kind of a trailblazers letter which used to come, and the 250 sales guys, who's ranking where. So when it used to come, I was interesting to look at it. And the only thing I used to look for is, are any of my batchmates there, right? If nobody was there, no pressure, put it down, go and work. And one fine day, I saw one of our batchmates' name in that. And it really troubled me. The whole day I said like that. I was not feeling good about it. It's like, that famous scene of Three Idiots where Madhav and Sharma Joshi are feeling bad because Amit came on top, right? So it was like that. And next 6 months, I really worked hard. And by the end of the year, I was in the top 25, So I'm just relating to that, saying that, that is how we are wired in terms of coaction, because the organizations, the templates that they work with push you towards that how are you performing against somebody else. And I think, I may not say, I won't agree that it's the best template, but that's a template we've got, and somewhere we've got used to working with that. So
Right.
I think it's going to be very difficult for us to find some other template where we are able to, look at people and say, hey, this guy brings the following things. These are his or her drivers. I will work with them on this and make them productive as though they're freelancers in the company. In an organization context, I think it's very difficult to carry it off because you have so many people working. You cannot work with individual templates and make it work. So we bring processes, we bring all these comparisons to make people more productive. And
Yeah.
I think it is even difficult in a WFH kind of a situation, where we are using more technology. Like over the last 2 months, we had 40 people in 2 batches, batch 1, batch 2. And when they came on board, a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of bonhomie, they talked about each other. I wonder, 3 months from now, when the scoreboard is out there, whether people will be happy about other success, or they feel bad about it, or they feel nudged to do better, or they'll simply quit and go because they couldn't be on par with somebody else who are depending on whether that person was their best friend or enemy, right? So I think coaction is something that will drive organizations even more in the space of work from home right now, for the reason that there is no other tool that we have found in the past. Now, through technology, we will actually bring more dashboards. Companies that are more savvy with these dashboards and MIs will throw it at people. And I would like to believe the only way this will happen right now is through the interfaces of the screen and phone calls. And it will also eliminate whatever human touch that was available in the past in the form of relationship. So I think it is the only tool we learned in the past, and that is what we're going to use more in the remote working model. Uh, I wish we know different tools to get better at this, but my entire context of co-action is that we that's the only hammer we've got so far, and we've been using it pretty well.
Do you think there are some other tools which are possibly better replacements for this coaction effect?
Definitely, I think if we are able to provide individual connects to people, because I believe that however big your organization is, you are at the end of the day part of a particular unit. Where each unit has a manager, and so they're all every company divides its units into manageable, managerial bandwidth. That being said, it is possible for managers to sort of build that connection with people, understand their drivers, what we call at Expino as get their world. If they're able to get that world, I think then those tools which will enable them to be connecting to the job. You can't actually just give a dashboard of your peers and make somebody motivated, because people will switch it off. That's how it is at home also. We try that at home. We say, look at your sister or brother. And, it doesn't work at home. People have already now, unlike in the past, people clearly say that I am different. My identity is different. I work differently. So clearly, I think it's only possible at an individual unit level. Whatever the organization drives as a template, I would like to believe that if we are able to form the individual connections and take the pains to understand the drivers of people who are working with us, then I think we'll be able to invoke them, and we'll be able to align them to their goals and the organization goals together. And sometimes it could even be momentary, because I think for beyond a point, the organization goals, the unit goals, and the individual goals may not actually align. And there would be a separation point. But as long as they are together, even if they disagree, they will align, and possibly it will work for the unit and the individuals concerned for that moment. So I would like to believe that if you look at organization like units, and each unit connecting with their members in a truly unconditional way, I think it's possible to get people's world and drive them to what they want to achieve along with the organization purpose.
Absolutely. And it sounds, I think what you just covered is exactly what empathy is, right? Like that is what organizations, if they have to go and make that connection at an individual level, that's exactly what empathy is, right? So what I hear is that basically organizations need to move away from coaction effect and move towards a more empathetic lookout and work culture. Tell me about, are there any best practices that you would recommend wherein people can start really doing what you just mentioned, is connect with the members of the organization at that level? What are some of the best practices that we can possibly incorporate?
I don't know we call it best practice, but I think it all starts with intent. I believe that if there is intent, then it is easy to build practices, and every organization, I believe, will have people who can create those pathways. It's not rocket science. I mean, like one of the examples that is glaring at this point of time is they're all on Zoom, right? Who doesn't know Zoom today? But we know Zoom as a company which possibly is gained the most during pandemic. And a company which was $330 million now is double its size, $660 million, maybe $1 billion this year in terms of turnover. But what we don't know is 2018, 2019, Zoom was amongst the best employers to work on last year. 2021 now, this year when their business doubled, and I'm sure every employee must be putting on crazy hours. They went on to be the best employer, one of the best employers, which is top 20 on Glassdoor. How did that happen?
Yes.
I believe, Zoom said this is a year where we'll focus on community, connection, and empathy. They put empathy out there as a word. And they worked along that. And so no surprises there that, if you want a best practice, you look at what they put out and what they achieve, where the employees are saying that it's a great place to work. Right? Yeah. Where empathy was on top, it's a headline, right? So I believe that, there are many ways when companies really have taken it on in the past, it's really worked. If you look at the German Telefonica is a company which actually has about 44 million subscribers in Germany. And once their CEO said that, look, I will train people on it. And when they trained people across Germany, about 5,500 employees, they trained their employees. And they saw, in 6 weeks, they saw 6% increase in customer satisfaction. Remember how vexed all of us are when it comes to telecom companies' calls, right? So in a telecom company, they were able to get that increase, So I know in India, if anything is not 30%, 100%, we don't accept. But let's face it, 6% increase in 6 weeks was a lot, right? So these are companies which looked into empathy as a factor, trained people on empathy, and got something out of it in the short run. Though we have told always that empathy is something that it takes time to build. You're not born with it, so it means that it will take months for you to develop that as a skill, right? So, but here is, if you look at Telefonica's example, they were able to move at least some piece of it in 6 weeks. The last study I saw was 2015, which they did in UK about the most empathetic companies. I wish we published that every year. At least maybe you were those to do that going forward. And no surprises there. There were companies like LinkedIn, Microsoft, Google, Audi, who were in the top 10. And the bottom were some of the telecom companies, no surprises there. So I wish, we are able to create that, benchmarking as well in terms of empathy. I am told by search consultants that, nowadays when they're hiring leaders, they've been asked to look for empathy as a factor. So if you ask me from a best practice point of view, I would say that the two things that we need to possibly remember as a company, if we can do, one is building relationships. If we can build, internal connections at every level, a relationship as a value, then empathy can be unconditional. Remember what I said earlier, that empathy has always been conditional, because if you're good to me, if you're a performer, and my relationship with you is great, then I'll be empathetic to you. So it can become unconditional if the relationship is built across the company, as a value. The second is, I think we all tend to work with our colleagues with kind of an expiry mindset, in the sense that we'll say we look at it for 6 months, we've got conditional that everybody amongst us is replaceable. If it doesn't work out with you, I'll bring somebody else. I think that's how even the colleagues work with each other. If it doesn't work out with this boss, with this company, I'll go out find somebody. So constantly we think our best employee is somewhere out there, right? So I recently wrote about it, but I think I wrote about it because I reflected on it hard, and I felt like we are always in search of unknown angels, because we don't want to work with the known devils, right? So what it is doing is that we are unable to commit to our colleagues, ourselves, all the time, and are also unable to work with the unworkable that they're bringing to us. See, every relationship that we have at home, siblings, spouses, kids, parents, in-laws, friends, if at all, relatives, everywhere there is so much garbage thrown at us, right? In different ways, if I have to use that word for a want of a better one. But we somehow manage it. We don't run away from all those things. Most of us, we don't. And we deal with it. But at work, we seem to have our own boundaries, expiry dates with people, so that we tend to sort of work with a lot of these conditionalities and templates. I think if organizations can build relationships internally and strongly believe that we've got the best talent, I think they would be the best template, I would call it, from a best practice point of view. They can think of these two, If you are able to internalize that we've got the best talent, and with every manager, then empathy can become a DNA of the company. Now, these two things can be run primarily, in my view, the best practice will be run through rituals. Your hiring process, your new employee induction process, internal meetings, your employee separations, your town halls, the celebrations that you have, all these, I think, and many other rituals that your companies do in terms of connecting with people, uh, are very important practices to build empathy, in my view. Now, for this to happen, you need to, one, create rituals and be patient about it. It is not like a switch, that, and employees many a times are also skeptical about any new thing that starts in a company saying this is a gimmick, this is an event, because they've seen so much of it that, they're very skeptical about things that happen. So they either are absent from it or do not participate well enough to your expectations. So leaders, especially in companies, will be very patient about these rituals, and I believe
Yeah.
rituals will create this. And uh, everybody will throw tantrums like I talked about our kith and kin and relatives, friends and partners. So the employees in their own way may not be that emotionally expressive, but they would still do that to us. It is the leader's job to keep explaining the context, keep redefining the context to employees, and go through the ritual. So I would like to believe that these are three things that I would call as the template, if at all, of building relationships internally, unconditionally, believing well and truly that you have the best set of employees with you and they're not somewhere out there, and bridging it, all these things together with rituals, and that is what I would call as a template for building empathy within an organization.
I think there's, from what I hear, is also that there's a need for, what that entails is that there's a need for a lot of trust that needs to be at the leadership level for their employees. Like they need to trust their employees a lot more, I guess, uh, than maybe before if they're not already doing that. Um, Tell me about, you mentioned that the something at the leadership level we need to do this, at the HR level we need to do this. Now, in general, if you were to talk about really driving this culture of creating an empathetic and high performing organization, an organization where there is that connection between the company and the employee, who is the onus on? Is it to build that? Is it on the HR department? Is it on the CHRO? Is it on the CEO? On the leadership? Who is it that needs to take it up?
See, for me, the answer is obvious, isn't it? It is leadership. It is the CEO. It starts from there, and I think HR picks it up from there. For me, HR is a sounding board to a CEO, and once they align, the execution partner is what HR becomes, and they go about it. So that is how I see the entire piece of how this building this workplace culture, starts in any company. I remember in one of the organizations I worked, there was this employee engagement survey, and it came out that amongst many other things, many of the members expressed that the managers are reluctant to have a conversation about career.
Hmm.
Right? They're saying they're not having career conversations. And I saw the CEO of the company immediately taking the plane and visiting, sort of all the locations, meeting about 350 managers in a month's time. Think about the countless hours that would have taken to travel across and actually meet so many people. Basically, what she was doing is demonstrating that it is possible to, sort of meet people one to one. And what she did, she was actually talking about career. So she gave a template saying, if I can do it, you can do it too. And we saw that company which had a 67% attrition moving to 28% in about a year and a half time.
Yeah.
Purely because the leader took the onus of, demonstrating that I can give time, you can give too. So I think that whenever leaders take onus of it, it is possible that you can actually build it yourself. Everybody else, like HR, marketing, sales, finance, everybody else is, for me, is the same as any department. I would not put HR somewhere else, because I would like to believe HR is more execution sounding board than they have to do it, because the action happens at a line manager level every day. Right? People are working at finance, at sales, at marketing, at technology, whichever department that you're working in, supply chain, for example. So that means the action is happening there, and the experience is getting created at the last month. HR
Yeah.
cannot be there everywhere. At best, they can give a template. So I would like to believe starts at the top, and it has to be integrated into the DNA of the company, something that they should measure. And I think any company which can provide that psychological safety to employees, that I am safe. Why do we behave like we like to behave at home? It's because we feel safe at home. I think organizations find people who are trying to find that space, because I'm not so sure many of us feel secure at work. That emotional security or psychological safety at work possibly is not available for many of us, and that's why we have many of these breakdowns at work. So I would like to believe it starts from the top, like no doubts at all about that. And it is the job of the leader to provide that psychological safety to their team for an enabling culture to get built at a company.
Absolutely. At this point, I'd just like to remind everyone that you're watching the 5th episode of Wellness Changemakers Leadership Edition, in which today's guest is, or rather, a changemaker today is Mr. Kamal Karan, who's a talent specialist. He's an entrepreneur, and he's also one of LinkedIn's top voices 2020. Uh, you know, uh, it's difficult for me to really list all his accomplishments, but he has over 2 decades of experience in the corporate world. And previously, you mentioned that you have consulted in executive search, among other things, staffing solutions for a lot of companies. And now, if I were to start listing companies, it would probably take the rest of the half an hour. But just to name some names, guys, for you, for our audience today: Citibank, Google, HP, TVS Motors, Adobe, Intel, Motorola, Renault, Nissan. These are just some of the companies that you have worked and consulted, among the many that you have worked with. Kamal, since you mentioned that, at a lot of people now at the hiring stage itself have started looking at that a leader should have empathy. And of course, our discussion till now clearly shows that it is the leader who has to really drive it to a certain extent. What do you think is the outlook currently? Do you think, like, most say leaders need to develop the skill, don't have it, or we are getting better, and maybe we'll get there very soon? What is your opinion of that?
I think COVID definitely has brought in a little more, awareness into organization hiring process about this. But also, you have to take the context into play. When people are hiring, they are hiring people mostly for roles which is going to give them an economic lift in one way or the other. It's going to make them more productive. You're hiring a CEO, you're expecting them to either sustain success or mostly turn around. You're not hiring from outside if you're doing well most often, right? You're likely to hire from outside if you want different expertise. As much as factors like empathy come into play while hiring, because you want somebody who takes care of your own people, but it is not like number one on the list, and it cannot be also in the context of how they're hiring. So they will look at people who make the impact, who bring the expertise of, let's say, you want sales expertise, you want operational expertise, you want financial expertise, somebody who brings M&A kind of a mindset. So if you look at all these pieces, somewhere with the hard skills and the soft skills, somewhere in between stands empathy. So, and of course, you have tools to today, assess empathy and things like that. But I have not seen an organization going overboard and rejecting somebody because he or she did not have any. Because the factors for which they're recruiting are completely different. The must-have list is what taking precedence over the nice-to-have list. And as hard as it sounds, empathy today is falling in the nice-to-have list. So,
Right.
in the hiring of the senior leaders, and also because over a period of time we are all hardwired to do certain things how we have grown up, and society, like I said, we have not been brought up in an empathetic society. So it's quite likely that some of these factors we either have picked in the companies that we have worked for, in our growth route, and it would take time to build that as an ability as well. So I think most of the organizations are looking at, is this person coachable, trainable? In the factors that we think are critical to us, let's say empathy and culture driving and people orientation, that is the path they are taking versus looking at empathy as a hard factor or rejecting or selecting someone.
Absolutely. Do you think that maybe I'm just putting a random number out there, in the next 10 years, it's possible that that might actually become one of the must-haves as well.
I wish I could give a straight answer yes, but I think I would think the answer lies in how we build a society, how we raise the kids, how possibly I'm hoping with COVID we've all become more empathetic, and I hope not post vaccination and all will go back to our old ways. My own take on that is it can happen faster than 10 years, but I think it would depend as to how societally we are able to be more sensitive and empathetic versus the apathetic people that we have been over a period of time. Lots has changed in the last 1 year, we know that, but post COVID, or if at all COVID goes away soon, will we get back to our old ways, or what we have learned in the last 1 year, we capture that as a part of our arsenal and say that this is a new skill I've learned, and I think it makes sense. It is, it is making an impact on me and others, and we want to carry it. So I would like to believe that definitely we possibly will incrementally progress there, and there won't be any radical transformation overnight. I'm an optimist, but still I believe that if we are able to transform our society, organizations are just extension of our society.
Looking back at all the experience that you have, all the consultancy that you have done, all the companies that you have worked with, especially, okay, so at this point, I should probably tell everyone that, before Expino, Kamal was actually the MD of Kelly Services India and Malaysia, and he steered them into profitability. And before that, he was the APAC head of Randstad. We are based out of Kuala Lumpur, where he launched their operations in China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and Singapore. What difference did you see between, say, Indian companies and Southeast Asian work culture, rather, between Indian companies and Southeast Asian companies in your experience at that time, in terms of empathy?
I would say I wouldn't see that in terms of, I never evaluated possibly from an empathy point of view, but now that you asked me to go back and reflect, I would like to believe I didn't find any great changes. I believe that maybe societally, we possibly, in a way Asians, and I think in a certain way we relate to people. I didn't find any great difference between how Southeast Asia was and how India is, how India was at that point of time, from an empathy point of view. Top of the mind, but I just can't think anything was different. I think it's probably similar.
Sure. Thank you so much. And, we've already started receiving some questions in our comments. Guys, please do. We will be taking up your questions very soon. Please do share your questions in the comments, and we'll start taking them in a bit. Kamal, looking back at all the experience, all the companies, everything, if you were to look back and think that, yes, this company, this leader, without naming names, is the epitome of how a company should be in terms of work culture, in terms of leadership, in terms of how the HR department conducts everything, how employee engagement is there. Tell us, could you give us an example of one such company, and what was so different about it as compared to others?
See, I can only talk through personal experience. I don't know anything from outside, works at all or not. Definitely, I think I'm proud to name them. I work for a company called Musthave, which was run by Mr. Pandirajan as a promoter. And I think, though they had possibly every profession running it, HR, finance, everything, they bought the best professionals in to run businesses. I think they ran it with the heart. Like Aristotle said, right? You can educate the mind, but if you don't educate the heart, that is not an education. So I thought that company was an epitome of that, as long as it existed as Musthave. Musthave actually meant my word, and they made a huge difference to many of us. And I think the connection that they were able to establish with people, the sense of purpose that they were able to provide to people, the kind of people they recruited, they never went and got people from premier institutes and made stars out of them. So I think they got people and made heroes out of them. So the company which I joined with 12 crores, and by the time I left, out close to 1,000 crores in 8 years, and it became much bigger even after I left. So I think it was a combination of what the promoter calls seemingly misfit people actually doing extraordinary things, So clearly, I think if there was one company which I worked in, which would put people ahead of everything else, and we were fiercely competitive, we were fighting with each other every day. I saw promoter was solving one fight or the other. Nobody left because of a fight or a conflict, And very proud people, young company, and they everybody, the promoters knew everybody's names, It's a large company, like I said, it almost was 800, 900 people by the time I left. So what I saw is the context of purpose, the context of people connect, and the quest for growth was all combined without having to compromise on integrity. As one company, I have not seen anything like that in my life, and I think as long as it lasted as Mafo, I think they were the best company where I saw all these things coming together because promoter created that. He brought in leaders who actually were part of it and who lived that through. I don't think he paid top dollars to people, but I think people there work because they're simply, married to the purpose of, what we are actually doing for the company, building the largest HR company in the country, and we did good at that point of time. So I think that was one experience that I can't forget. Where I think if there are 3-4 decisions I took in life, that was one of the most important decisions I took is joining Mafo. And whatever part that I've become today is tribute to what Mafo made me go through. Thanks to the wonderful people, who were in the leadership team, the promoter, Mr. Pandirajan. So many fond memories. I found my co-founder, Anil, professional side of it there as well, though he was a friend for the longest time. So many facets of people, experiences that I got, even the international exposure, how they used to bet on people. One of the things when I wrote In Search of Unknown Angels is that in that company I found how they were betting on people who had no knowledge. When I took my first overseas opportunity, I had not even crossed the country even once. So I got a passport in 5 days in Tatkal, and 8th day I was in a new country and they called me CEO of Malaysia those days. So the bet that they used to take on people is what I think made that company. And I think that's one of the companies that I want to highlight amongst the 4 employers I've worked, where, like I said, the combination of purpose, people, and we always complained that we never had process in that company, and I think the process was people in that company, and they built possibly the most admirable staffing company in the country.
That sounds wonderful. That sounds absolutely fantastic. Like, I think it's everyone's dream to really work in a company like that, isn't it? So that's sounds really lovely. I hear a lot of like you mentioned that, yes, sure, there were some conflicts and stuff, but no one really left. And clearly that's a result of those good relationships between employees, between employer and employee. So we had a question from one of our audience members along the same lines, which was that how can a leader or manager go about expressing criticism to their employees without really spoiling their relationship?
Okay. I think, when I was younger, I just told people as I felt. But somewhere on the way, one of the HR managers taught me a tool about start, stop, continue. So when you are giving a feedback to people, can you actually start telling them what they're not doing? So it goes in that heading. And when you tell things which you don't like, what they're doing in the stop, stop doing this title. And I'm sure they're working with you because some things they must be doing right? So for that, you put them under the heading of continue. So whenever we use this framework, we use that even at Xvino to get feedback from people. As you know, when we ask feedback from people, they actually are, very guarded. People think it's a trick. You don't know why they're asking this, right? So most of them don't even participate in the feedback session. So what I felt is that whenever you want to put criticism in these 3 buckets of start, stop, continue, I think the emotions were more or less managed. And one of the constant challenges I have faced throughout is when we are criticizing people based on what they did. And if you're able to segregate that versus the expectation of the role, the emotion is taken away. But it is difficult. We end up saying, you did this, you didn't do that kind of stuff. if we are able to elevate that conversation to the role expectations and what the role was supposed to do, I think the emotions are taken away. But I find the tool of start, stop, continue as the best tool to provide criticism, because then it allows you to highlight the best things, and sort of ask them to do new things that you're expecting them to do, and possibly park the criticism that under the stop heading. So then you possibly are connecting to the person in a better way.
Absolutely.
I don't do that all the time, but I found that useful whenever I had to really solve the biggest conflict I'm going through.
Let me flip the question. What do you think? How can leaders also be more open to taking criticism from their reportees, from their employees? Because I think a lot of times, a lot of leaders may get offended for whatever reasons. So, what can leaders do now for the same thing, to be able to take that feedback?
Even today, I don't like it when people give me feedback, but I think leaders should have a coach. Most importantly, everybody should think they deserve a coach, and organizations and HR department should take seriously that all leaders need a coach. I'm not trying to increase the business of coaches, but I think it has helped me a lot over a period of time, and that's a first step that anybody can take. But at Xvino, we believe, this is a template. Actually, in appraisals, we give this to people saying that you have to take, the three things that we do. One is providing feedback of the performance of the time that went by, setting developmental goals, setting the annual goals for next year. And the fourth quadrant is about feedback to the supervisor, where we actually put start, stop, continue. Right? I believe it's a template which works both ways, where you have to take feedback from people. In this format, allows you, your reportee to give a feedback in a very structured way, and likely that you will be less emotional while you take that feedback. And also sometimes, it gives you a podium or a platform to explain why you do certain things. So I think the start, stop, continue is a great tool even for taking feedback. But the point is, do you really want to take feedback, right? So because then if you take feedback, you have to act on it, right? So I find it extremely hard if I ask for a feedback and people tell me, come and stop being sarcastic, or you don't acknowledge people. That's my natural brain, and I struggle with that. So, but I think when you are given feedback through these three, there are certain good things also they're telling you. So I think it feeds into your ego, so and you feel good about it. So I think maybe the things that you should stop doing, you'll possibly consider them better. And what they're asking you to do, start new things, will become easier, because that is a form of expectation. So I think this tool, in my view, works well. But the first and most important thing is, I believe that all leaders and organizations need coaches.
That's a really great framework. I have a question here from Rohit, which is that employees are sometimes reluctant to change what's happening, changes in company policies or changes in processes. How do you handle those employees as a leader?
Yeah, I think if you give away, everybody thinks they have a better process in hand, and in their head, and everybody is an expert in a process they're possibly not willing to consider, right? So you also have to understand that when you work in startups, some of these processes are easy to sort of alter and give feedback to people. Whereas when you work for large enterprises, what I've seen is that large enterprises control their entire processes of the company are sacrosanct for them. They run the company through process, and they pride in that. They invest dollars, millions of dollars to improvise the process, use technology, and they use a lot of data to actually arrive at some of the process, saying this process will work because we've already done the trial on this, pilots on it, studies on it. So I would like to believe in large enterprises, it becomes a compliance factor for companies, and people want, or rather companies want people to conform to those standards because it's easy to control and standardize, right? So I think if you're a leader, the best part is to sort of give them or allow them to show success in that process. That's the only way people accept it. But having said that, I found, when you're working large companies, mostly gets into a mindset saying, "Karna hai to karo, nahi to," it's like that. So it is tough to convince every employee to fall in line. But I think if employees are able to find success, or if it makes their job easier, they are far likely to align to the process. Honestly, I don't have a silver bullet for this question. That's the best I could.
Absolutely, I think that's great in itself. That's the best, really. We have another question which we received from Sajeev. This is more his particular situation, which is that he's in sales in the insurance industry, and they're not getting to do those face-to-face calls anymore, and it is affecting the team's performance. Self pressure is mounting. How in this situation, in this scenario, as a leader, can I manage my team?
No, it's a tough time, and calling out, and because we are also trying to get into a new world and trying to get new tools, to sell, right? So one is the situation has changed around us, so and we're also now from a face to face right now getting into making a phone call and trying to make the sale. So I think the change itself is daunting and intimidating. That's part one, according to me. So we have to get used to that. And clearly, it's some of the industries are far more affected than the others, so that pressure is likely to stay. Now that you've chosen to be in this industry, it is something that you made a part of yourself. Uh, I'll only say that the change in the tool is part of the problem in a way, because we are not possibly used to, doing phone calls and making sales like we did face to face in the past. So if we can possibly learn this tool better, upskill ourselves to make phone calls better. Uh, at least I also realized that all my life I was in field sales. So talking to customer, finding them on Zoom, trying to get an appointment, talking to them. I'm not able to convince them like I used to convince, going sitting in front of them with my executive presence and converting. It has had a whole lot of stress into my own sales process and my teams as well. But I think over a period of time, we've realized we've gotten better. We've spent more time thinking what is a better narrative to connect to the customer. Can we find the connection to these guys, or is it just like we just get on a call and blabber what all we have to say about our company? So I think my invitation to you is see if there are these. This is the tool which is coming in the way, because the mode obviously is new. What are the two things that you can do to adopt to this new way of selling? Right. So that is my only invitation to you, and I'm hoping that you are working for a company where they're empathetic to your current situation, and it's not just the case with you, and it is also the case with many others, because then the coaction come into play in one way or the other, where clearly it is a challenge for everyone. Then possibly it's not a matter of your skill or effort; it is purely the context. So I guess if that is the case, then you don't have to worry. If it is only your team and you, then I think it's important for you to look at where am I? Am I skilled enough? Is my team skilled enough? That's what I would tell.
Thank you so much, Kamal, for that. I hope, Sajeev, that answered your question. Just to remind everyone, we still have about 7 minutes. Please do share if you have any questions for Kamal. Enter them in the comment section, and we'll definitely take those. Kamal, going back to when you mentioned about the must-haves and the would be nice qualities in leaders that are evaluated at the time of hiring, could you give us some insights into those must-haves as well?
I think when we hire people, or most organizations, when they hire people, they look at the hard skills, right? The hard skills is, does he or she bring sales skills? Let's say if they're hiring somebody for a sales role. If they're hiring somebody for a technology role, they would look at whether he or she has done that before. Primarily, it's about, have you done this before becomes a must-have skill, especially in leadership roles, right? Because then the belief all of us have is that if you've done before, you can do it again. That's a logic. Though the flip side to this is recruitment is considered a process to hire people for potential and not for the past. But the only way we determine the potential is if you've done that before, except when you're hiring freshers, right? So clearly the must-have is the expertise. Whether you know those tools, if you're a technology person, and if you are in sales, like I said, whether you have you bring relationships become, a network becomes a must-have. Clearly, in some of the cases, unfortunately, it is true, but Pedigree becomes important. Many of the companies say that the must-have is IIT, IIM, and so batch. I'm not saying what is right or wrong here, but I'm just narrating, reporting what the organizations are seeking. So they are definitely seeking pedigree, numbers of years of experience, because they believe that if you have X number of experience, then you can possibly do the job better. Or because the internal parity setting is there, you need certain experience. But startups is a different world. They're
Of course.
definitely not looking at that. They're looking at potential completely. Large enterprises go by the template of pedigree, go by the experience, expertise that you bring in from a must-have perspective, clearly, and also the soft skills part of it as to whether you can communicate well. If you're in a leadership position, can you communicate well? Do you have the ability to influence? In many cases, we've also seen that whether they have great social media profiles, if they're hiring head of HRs or some of the key positions in sales in B2B, they're also looking at social profiles today from a must-have situation, right? So these are the 3-4 must-have that we have seen, at this point of time that's going along. Experience, expertise, pedigree, in that order.
Thank you so much. Paul, what do you think? Is empathy important for building financially successful organizations, in your opinion, in your experience?
Yeah, in the past, empathy was not the heading. Now, I guess, it is real in the context of where we have landed ourselves. But I think when I look at the companies that I mentioned, the companies I worked, we all worked there because we had phenomenal relationships with our own team. That many of those relationships were unconditional. Some of them were conditional, let me admit that, in the sense that that's how the relationship started because of conditionality. We started liking somebody because of who they were and what they did. And I guess with more coaching and more awareness, we saw relationships getting built. So I think I have seen financially sustainable models getting built by companies which focused on relationships, which in turn built empathy. In my view, I don't think they stand as two separate things. In my view, you just can't be empathetic without being connected to the person. So it is getting important. And if you are looking at the attrition rates of companies, what is going wrong today, all these things are fallout of those lack of relationships at work, right? Because if your only relationship with that company because they were paying you X salary, or you were called a vice president or something like that, or you had an excellent job, or you were working in a particular location, right? So then all these things are transient, they can change, right? So what is, in my view, for personal life or professional life, it's very possibly long-lasting is your ability to have relationships, and empathy is an outcome of relationship. So I think from that context, long-lasting organizations, financially successful organizations can be built if we are able to harness those relationships at work, and empathy will be an outcome.
Well, I think we're pretty much at the end of our time. I think before we end this, I have one last question for you, which is that what are what is the future of workplace dynamics looking like, given the current context of the pandemic, work from home, and empathy?
I think organizations need to balance the people, process, technology, and the usage of data together. Many of the organizations are so data centric that people get missed. Many of the organizations are all process and tech centric that most of the time people are the casualties of companies saying that I'll be so strong process wise that I will compensate that for lack of people, right? So I think when I look at companies' overall makeup, if they're able to get a good balance of the people, process, technology, and how they use data, I think they'll be able to build a company for long-lasting success. And clearly, the people part is where empathy as a quotient can be built, right? So not many companies put empathy as a heading, but they possibly are hidden in many things that the companies do, right? So I think if you are able to marry these four things very well as a company and put people in the front, I would like to believe that you can build companies which are long lasting from success and the empathy point of
Kamal, thank you so much. I think we've had a wonderful session today. As I said, it's been an honor to have you on here. To everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us today. We learned about workplace dynamics, about how we need to build those individual connections, employers and employee and employee, and how we need to create these empathetic organizations, how maybe coaction effect is something that may need to be replaced with a new model in the coming days to build those future ready successful organizations. We of course looked at what are some of the ways in which employees can take criticism better from their employers, from their managers, from their leaders, and even the reverse. What can leaders do to be able to take that feedback better from their reportees, from their employees? So thank you so much, Kamal. Thank you so much for giving your evening to us. And we really, really wish you all the best. And we hope that your family stays safe, recovers well, or recovers soon, and everything goes well. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Suresh, for having me and for all of you joining today. Before I go, I just want to recommend a book for all of you who want to
Yes.
build on empathy. It is a book called The War for Kindness by a gentleman called Zamil Zaki. It talks about building empathy in a fractured world. It's a great read. It talks about that empathy is not a train that you're bought with, but is something that you can build over a period of time. It's a kind of a hack, you call it, of building empathy in a fractured world. It's The War for Kindness, available on Amazon. I don't get any commission for it, but I think it's one thing that we should do. The War for Kindness by Zameen Zaki.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kamal. And again, all of you who joined us today, may you stay safe. May you stay well. Please, please take care of yourselves. Hope your family stays well. And next week, do join us again. We will be sharing the promos soon. We will have Paul Dupuy, who is the MD and CEO of Randstad India, joining us next week. Please do join us again and have a good night. Bye bye.